Welcome to the Bast Audiophile with your host, the Bast, an audiophile. In last episode 86, we've introduced you to the AMP acoustic panels, an innovation in audio acoustic. The link is down below in the description. Ecological, healthy, affordable, and overall very effective, we've measured and demonstrated that AMP might be the future of acoustic panels. The man behind this innovation is Samuel Jacques, president and founder of Studio Solution. Samuel is a professional jazz pianist. He had to drop out of university in studio engineering because his acoustic panel company took off too quickly. Today we enter the world of a man who lives and breathes an often misunderstood reality, the reality of room acoustic. Unfortunately, please be considerate, due to technical problems my mic didn't work, so we'll have to use the mic of the camera.
My name is Samuel Jacques. I'm the CEO and founder of Studio Solution. We make acoustic panels with environmentally friendly materials and local materials. I've been in the audiophile niche for quite a while because of my mother. That maybe you know, she's a singer and songwriter, Anne Bisson. She made the hit album Blue Mind and September in Montreal. And because of that, I often went to the audio fest in Montreal with her to help her sell CDs. And I was able to listen to a lot of great systems there. I think I was 10 years old the first time I went there, and I went every year. So it's always been a very important aspect of my life, having a great sounding system and really sit down to appreciate music and how it sounds. For me, it was really a no-brainer to make panels not only for musicians like me, but also for people who like great sounding music and like to treat their rooms, because it's something people don't do enough. You have a great system, but in a bad sounding room, it's not gonna make it shine like it should. I started making panels because I wanted to become a sound engineer. But then I started making them for friends. I had a garage, so I just bought some equipment, started making more and more panels, and it soon overtook on everything else in my life. I went to a sound engineering school for 3 weeks, and then I had to drop out because I had too much work. We had a lot of demand because it was a niche that was not filled here in Quebec. The other companies make panels for big venues and government stuff. But we have this niche for musicians at home, studios, audiophiles that was not filled by anyone else.
Many audiophiles think that panels are gimmicks, are not important. So what do you tell them?
Rooms are not meant to sound good. A room in a house, it's if you go to a recording studio, you'll see all the walls are angled. They're made out of wood. It's really thought for that, not in a house. So when you listen to your music, you really want to have your sound system sound the best possible. You invest a lot of money in it, so you want it to shine, and you don't want to hear it with delays bouncing over the walls. You don't want to hear any resonances or standing waves that can really be annoying. It's funny because acoustic treatment has been it's a proven science. Not too esoteric, but still people are I guess they're not aware of them that much. Some people they don't really understand what they do, or they might be skeptical, but it's such an important aspect of treating a room. How does your room sound, not just your system.
So panels can make the image clearer?
Yeah, because if you take care of all your first reflections, then you have the direct sound coming to your ears. If you have reflections, you have the same sound coming with a few milliseconds of delay, and sound waves will interact with each other. Peaks will amplify each other. Nulls will, make them even lower. So it affects the sound of your music. If you only have absorption on one side, it also will create some unbalancing, in the stereo image. So it's important to improve the direct sound of your system. The most important thing in an acoustic panel is the efficiency, of course. But you have so many different types, thickness, size, or even the type of treatment you want to have. Do you want to absorb by friction, by pressure? Do you want to diffuse? So those are all needed in a room. So it really depends on your needs, what your room is like. So that's why we do a lot of evaluation, and people reach out to us for questions and for advice. But I'd say a very important factor for us, at least, is the environmental impact of the panels, because as I said, we're all young people working here. This is a very important issue for us, and the efficiency of the panel, of course. To have a good absorption with friction, you need fibers that are the denser the better. Sound goes through it, and with friction it absorbs it. So that's why rock wool and fiberglass are great absorbers too. And hemp, the one we made, is very similar to fiberglass in terms of density. So they perform very similarly. It's really the environmental impact that's completely different. Acoustic panels are usually made of fiberglass or rock wool. These are very harmful to the environment. They need a lot of energy to be produced. They can be harmful for your health, and you can't dispose of them in a good way. So we are the only ones in North America offering hemp acoustic panels. Hemp is a plant that necessitates very few resources to grow. And by growing the plant, because it's a plant, it absorbs carbon. So already you're completely elsewhere, with that product. It's already good for the environment, just making it. And it obviously performs great. We can talk about that. But also, if at the end of its life cycle, it can be recycled or disposed of safely in the environment. We actually worked closely with the hemp factory that's in Quebec. We're very lucky to have them here because it's the only one in North America, the only hemp making facility. And we work with them to create a product that's made for sound absorption, because they make a lot of hemp wool for residential application, for heat transfer. So we made something custom that is very dense, so it has a good low frequency absorption. And we have two formats. We have 2-inch and a 1/4 inch thick and the 1-inch thick. So the 1-inch is good for high frequencies, or if you want to treat echoes and reverberation or just first reflections. And the other one is good for, it's really a broadband acoustic panel.
How did you come up with the idea of the hemp?
For hemp, it was an idea of one of our first members called Vincent Piette. He was our first acoustician, and he developed a lot of our products like the quadratic diffuser and the membrane trap. And he told me about hemp, that we could replace it we could replace our rock wool with hemp. And I was really enthusiastic about it because it's such a great product. It's very, very environmentally friendly. It's safe. You can handle it with no problem. And a great thing about it too is it regulates humidity in a room. So for if you have guitars or piano, it helps keeping the tuning, because it prevents any a drastic drop or increase in humidity, because it's like a big sponge. It's like a buffer. Mm-hmm. So that's great for studios, or even for your equipment in your house. We reached out to the hemp manufacturer that we work with, and we developed that product. It took almost a year, to prototyping the wool, trying, different density, different type of product. They're also a new company, so they were really willing to experiment with us and, send us all those those test hemp so that we could try it, and we settled with the 90 kilogram per cubic meter version for our panels. The fabric we're using is recycled polyester from Quebec, and we really like the supplier that we have because they're one of the rare fabric companies that are still here. You know, it usually comes from China. But they make really, really good products, and their fabric is actually very good for sound absorption. We tested it, and it gives a very good, like a 10% increase in absorption. It's also made from polyester that's it's from plastic from the ocean. So we really thought we really liked that approach. Pollution in the ocean is a very big issue. So being able to reduce that by making products is something that we really like. What I think that's very interesting that we do is that we can print on the panels. We have a supplier that has a white fabric roll and can just print anything on it. So it makes for some really great artwork, because people have their listening rooms in their homes. Sometimes they're worried about putting all these panels on their walls, but being able to print anything on it makes it a really interesting piece of decoration. Instead of having an artwork or a painting on your wall, you can just print it on the panel, and it's going to be a very good two-in-one, absorptive and decorative. I'd say the best product for an audiophile is definitely diffusion. I've had discussions with someone about that said, I only put diffusers in my room. I don't put any, absorptive panels. But I'd say, I always tell people start with rule of thumbs, absorb your first reflections, with a square room, you're always going to have like lateral reflections, the first reflections from your speakers coming with delays at your ears, start with that. That's already pretty good. And then quadratic diffusers behind you, in front of you, they really make your room shine, they disperse sound, which makes the stereo image much more defined. You hear all the details. Mm-hmm. It gives a lot of life to a room. If you put too many bass absorbers or high absorbers, it really makes it shine again. There are a few types of sound diffusers. We are making quadratic one-dimensional diffusers. So our diffusers use the quadratic formula to diffuse sound. You really have to have this specific order of depth in the wells and width to achieve this, to get that result. So basically, it takes it takes sound waves and divide them by smaller sound waves across time. So it makes for a better impact curve. Instead of having one big impact and other ones close to it, you make an exponential curve out of it. So it really improves your decay curve. And we make one-dimensional quadratic diffusers because usually we prefer diffusing in the horizontal axis. If your wells are vertical, you're gonna diffuse on the horizontal axis. It's perpendicular to the well. And the last product I would put for audiophile room would be membrane bass traps. To get rid of modal resonances that you can have with a small room. So a lot of people have, they have their sound system at home, and sometimes it's in a small bedroom. And then you have all those nasty standing waves because of the wall dimensions, and you have a lot of pressure buildup at those points. So with membrane bass traps, you can really attenuate those and have a much clearer sound in your room, and the more you won't be standing in a null or in a peak when you're listening to your music anymore. Membrane bass traps, they don't absorb by friction like other panels. They absorb by pressure. It's basically a box sealed, so it's vacuumed. It has recycled plastic membrane at the top. We chose a flexible one to have a wide absorption over a high Q because we wanted to have one bass trap that's one size fits all. Instead of having to select one for each frequency. And in the panels, there's also two hemp wools that will absorb sound. So the membrane vibrates, it's vacuumed, so there's a lot of pressure that goes in the hemp, and because of that it absorbs those very low frequencies. It's only effective in the low register, but that's what you want with that product, because friction absorbers, they're very, very efficient in the high, mids, and a little bit in the bass, but in the bass it only goes down like this. So with a membrane trap, you really have this narrow absorption in the low frequencies, which is usually what you want. I think the biggest challenge is very small rooms because of bass buildup and lack of space. Bass traps and membrane bass traps are pretty thick. So if you have a very small room, let's say you have your office in your condo that you want to use as a studio or as a listening room, very small space, that can be problematic because you need bass absorption and you're limited in space. In the cities and condos now, they have big windows, from floor to ceilings. It creates a lot of reverberation. So I think that's what's most problematic in cities. Yeah.
How do you solve this? With bass traps, I guess.
Yeah, we try to use a lot of the ceiling because that's available, and if it's made out of concrete, we really want to put some stuff there because that's a very harsh surface, very reflective. This and using a carpet is good for reverberation. But other than that, if you have to put the most bass traps you can with the limited space you have. Yeah. Bass is really problematic in a room if it's left untreated. If you have a small room, it makes everything muddy, and the sound's not clear. When you listen to a double bass, let's say in a jazz trio, you want to hear the details. When you want to be able to hear what note they're playing. If it's just muddy and boomy, it's not as good. And some people think sometimes that when you absorb bass, you're gonna have less bass, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just gonna make it sound punchier and more defined, which is usually what you'd like. It makes for more even sound pressure. Sound in your room.
Can you have too much absorption?
Yes.
Too much diffusion, too much bass trap?
Yes. If some people, they try to attenuate their low frequencies with a lot of friction bass traps, but because they're also good in medium and higher frequencies, it will make the sound very dead inside the room. Yeah. So that could be, you could have too much. But then you can either remove some, replace them by other products, or just add some sound diffusion to your room, which is going to enhance your higher frequencies, improve the RT60 and those, make a very nice impact decay curve. So usually people tend to do that. They put a lot of bass traps if they have a small room and have low frequency problems, and then they put diffusion to alleviate the problem in the higher frequencies that too many bass traps create.
How do you, if you had to explain to someone who starts, what's the role of each absorption, bass trap, and diffusers? How do you play with that? How would you approach a room, and how do you select them, in which order, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so for a room to treat everything, you would start with friction absorptive tunnels. So you would put them in your room to reduce the decay time or to absorb first reflections of your sound system. Then you would use diffusion to improve your stereo image, to diffuse sound equally in the room, get rid of some resonances and standing waves. And then if you have a modal resonances problem in your room caused by walls, parallel walls, or an excess of pressure behind your speakers, then you would use pressure membrane bass traps that are very good at that because of their because they're a sealed box. It's vacuumed inside. There's a membrane. It's very, very good for pressure absorption.
So that's it. I hope that you appreciated this interview with Samuel, president and founder of Studio Solution. I'll leave a link down below in the description for their website. Feel free to subscribe to our channel, as we always try to bring new topics of great value for audiophiles like you. You're also kindly invited to take part of the making of these videos by becoming one of our Patreon. The link is down below in the description. We're looking forward to seeing you in our next episodes. Until then, take care, listen to good music, and goodbye.